In a time when destiny was inscribed by divine decree, there was a man whose very name was struck from the celestial record, a name once destined to bear a sacred legacy. You have heard of him, the firstborn of Judah, whose life was meant to be the beginning of a storied lineage, yet was abruptly halted by God's decisive judgment. In an era of patriarchs and promises, fate was sealed not by human tribunal, but by the impartial, awe-inspiring hand of the Almighty. Although his deeds remain shrouded in mystery, the scant biblical account reveals a man whose unrighteousness was so profound that God saw fit to erase him from the annals of the living. Within the unfolding tapestry of his family, Judah, his father, bore a burden of promise and expectation. As the keeper of divine covenants, Judah's lineage was to carry forward a sacred trust, one that would ultimately culminate in the birth of a great king, and many generations later, in the arrival of the Savior. Yet despite the invaluable inheritance bestowed upon him by fate, fell grievously short of the character required for such honor. His untimely death was not just a personal tragedy, but an ominous ripple that would foretell the calamities and reforms to come. The narrative, however, does not rest solely on the failure of In the wake of his demise, Judah faced the heavy responsibility of re-establishing the family line. Tradition demanded the observance of the Levirate law, a mandate compelling a man to raise offspring on behalf of his deceased brother. Thus, Judah entrusted his second son, Onan, with the sacred duty of begetting a child that would carry the promise of their forefathers. But Onan, driven by self-interest and a misguided desire to maintain his personal advantage, spurned the obligation. In his reluctance and misuse of his duty, he too fell under divine censure, and his life was cut short in a manner that echoed the fate of his departed brother. Into this vacuum of broken promises and divine retribution stepped Tamar, a woman whose resolve would come to redefine the legacy of her family. As a widow shunned by tradition and left without hope, Tamar dared to challenge the boundaries imposed by a patriarchal society. Her decisive actions, born of desperation and an unyielding commitment to secure her rightful place in the sacred lineage, altered the course of history. Her audacity, enshrined in the continuity of the covenant, set in motion events that would eventually pave the way for the emergence of the great King David and the eventual fulfillment of the divine promise in the birth of Jesus Christ. In the days that followed this fateful turning point, the quiet murmurs of destiny began to resonate more clearly amid the lives of those who were left to piece together the fractured tapestry of their forefathers' legacy. The home of Judah, once a sanctuary of ancestral honor, was now rife with tension and expectation, as every member of the family struggled to reconcile the weight of divine judgment with the hope of redemption. The memory of unfulfilled promise cast a long shadow upon the generations to come, spurring a profound introspection about the responsibilities that come with the sacred trust of carrying forward a holy lineage. Judah himself, stricken by grief and burdened with the guilt of his own missteps, walked the twilight corridors of his ancestral home in solemn reflection. He contemplated the high cost of pride and the silent, inexorable demand of responsibility, a responsibility not only to his heirs, but to the divine covenant that had been entrusted to him. Nights were filled with fervent prayer and days with quiet meditation as he sought clarity amid the swirling doubts of his heart. The ancient scriptures, long recited by the elders of his tribe, echoed in his mind with new urgency. Each verse was a mirror reflecting the inescapable truth that the ways of man were often estranged from the intended path of righteousness. And yet, in the midst of these personal reckonings, Judah recognized that every error bore within it the seed of a possible resurgence, a hidden promise that even the darkest moment could eventually yield the light of forgiveness and renewal. In this crucible of regret and hope, the role of Tamar took on an almost hallowed significance. Exiled not by her own choice but by the machinations of a world governed by patriarchal decree, she became both an emblem of suffering and a beacon of empowerment. Tamar's quiet perseverance in the face of an unforgiving society stirred within those who witnessed her plight an awakening, a realization that sometimes the divine plan requires the courage to step beyond established norms. Her bold act to secure her future was not driven by wanton rebellion, but by a deeply rooted commitment to the continuity of a promise that the union of blood and sacred duty was paramount over the fleeting prejudices of man. In her, the lost potential of found a new vessel. Her actions, though unconventional, were acknowledged by fate as indispensable for preserving the integrity of the divine covenant. As word of these events rippled outward, the community began to take notice. The elders, who had long safeguarded the ancient lore and the weighty traditions of their people, saw in this turbulent episode a striking parallel to the cyclical nature of human existence. They spoke in hushed tones of how moments of seemingly irrevocable loss could be transformed into opportunities for salvation, a recurring theme that transcended the limits of their immediate circumstances. Women and men alike found solace in the notion that even the most grievous error did not have to mark the end of a lineage. Rather, it could signal the beginning of a transformative process imbued with divine grace. In marketplace gatherings, at family tables, and during somber council meetings, the discourse steadily shifted from condemnation to reflection, a shift that invited the community to unite under the banner of redemption and to actively participate in mending what had been torn asunder. The spark of change was further nurtured by the practical application of ancient customs, such as the Levirate law, which, though steeped in ritual, held within it the promise of continuity. Onan's tragic failure to fulfill his duty had not only fractured the immediate line, but had also laid bare the vulnerabilities inherent in the system, a system that relied on unwavering adherence to divine ordinances. In the wake of such failures, the people came to understand that the law itself was a living instrument, one that, when applied with sincere commitment, could restore what had been lost. This understanding gradually permeated every stratum of society, from the highest echelons of tribal leadership to the humble dwellings of the common folk. In this collective journey toward rejuvenation, every recitation of sacred verses and every heartfelt prayer served as a reminder that, while human frailty was undeniable, the divine promise remained intact, awaiting its fulfillment through acts of courageous restoration. Amid this backdrop of introspection and communal resolve, the narrative of the once-erased legacy continued to unfold with layers of complexity. Judah, now a man transformed by sorrow and enlightenment, began to exhibit a tempered humility that resonated deeply with those around him. His personal journey from pride to penitence became a powerful lesson for the tribe, a lesson that underscored the inevitability of divine justice, even as it offered a pathway to redemption. In his quiet moments of self-examination, Judah recognized that every failure, no matter how profound, was an opportunity to realign with the divine will. This realization, though painful in its genesis, ultimately spurred him to seek reconciliation not only within his own heart, but also within the very fabric of his family's destiny. His actions, marked by a newfound dedication to humility and responsibility, served as a lodestar for a community that was eager to redefine its purpose in the wake of devastating loss. As the narrative pressed onward, the interplay between human imperfection and divine providence became ever more pronounced. The sacred texts, meticulously preserved and fervently cherished, provided a framework through which the events could be understood, not as isolated mishaps, but as integral components of a grand, overarching design. In every act of misfortune and every moment of regret, the hidden hand of destiny was discernible, guiding the fate of the people with an unerring precision. It was as if the divine presence, though often shrouded in mystery, was in constant dialogue with the hearts of men, whispering reassurances that no act of errancy was ever truly final, and that the path to eternal redemption was always open to those who embraced their shortcomings with sincerity and resolve. In the midst of this intricate dance between judgment and grace, the community began to look beyond the immediate tragedies that had once threatened to define their existence. Their eyes, now open to the profound lessons inherent in every hardship, turned instead toward the horizon of possibility. Each member of the tribe, from the wise elders to the hopeful youth, became a vital thread in the evolving tapestry of their shared destiny. They understood that the lineage, once endangered by the loss of and Onan, could be revitalized through collective will and the inexhaustible power of divine mercy. The legacy of the past, far from being a relic of sorrow, was recast as a dynamic force, a force that could propel them toward a future imbued with hope, resilience, and the promise of renewal. In the quiet aftermath of personal and communal reckoning, the people began to see that every misstep had seeded a possibility of reparation, a truth as enduring as the ancient verses that chronicled their history. As they gathered in humble assemblies beneath starlit skies, the retelling of old lessons mingled with fervent dreams of what might yet be. In these shared moments, voices rose in unison, echoing the timeless covenant that had once been jeopardized by fleeting acts of human frailty, but was now being painstakingly restored through acts of steadfast devotion. In these gatherings, stories of and Onan were recited not merely as warnings of divine displeasure, but as pivotal turning points that underscored the necessity of personal sacrifice and communal responsibility. Every recounted detail, the somber pronouncement against the lamentable defiance of Onan, and the indomitable spirit of Tamar, served as a mirror reflecting the multifaceted nature of the divine plan. Here, in the soft glow of flickering candlelight, the painful memories were transformed into lessons of humility, urging each listener to recognize the interplay between human error and the transformative power of redemption. As the community absorbed these teachings, a palpable shift occurred in their collective consciousness. No longer were they resigned to the certainty of past transgressions. Rather, they began to perceive each misfortune as the precursor to a greater, divinely orchestrated resurrection. The ordeal of Judah, whose journey from pride to penitence had left deep imprints on his soul, evolved into an enduring parable of the consequences of neglecting one's sacred duty. His heartfelt transformation was meticulously chronicled in the voices of those who witnessed his reflections, and it soon served as an enduring testament to the idea that every lapse in judgment was an invitation to reforge one's destiny in the relentless pursuit of divine favor. This renewed understanding resonated deeply within the hearts of the people, as they embraced a philosophy that every human failing could be interwoven with the threads of hope. From the darkest nights of despair emerged a collective resolve to rebuild the fractured lineage, a resolution that saw every sorrowful tear and every fervent prayer as steps toward the ultimate restoration of their ancestral covenant. In this spirit, the Levirate law was not only interpreted as a ritualistic obligation, but as an opportunity to reaffirm the sacred bonds that linked each generation to the divine promise. The very mechanism that had once exposed the vulnerabilities of their system was reimagined as a conduit through which the divine could express its unyielding mercy. As elders recited the ancient texts with a novel blend of solemnity and optimism, the younger members of the tribe listened with wide-eyed wonder, absorbing the intricate dance between fate, free will, and divine intervention. They were taught that the seemingly unalterable destiny was, in fact, malleable, subject to the transformative power of sincere repentance and determined action. In this context, every act of contrition became an act of creative renewal, and every moment of introspection was viewed as a stepping stone toward reclaiming the inherited promise. The communal fervor sparked by these revelations soon gave rise to small acts of collective restoration, whether rebuilding a crumbling homestead, nurturing a long-neglected field, or simply offering words of solace to a neighbor in distress. Each gesture, though humble in isolation, contributed to a broader mosaic of revival that touched every facet of their society. Within this renewed communal ethos, the legacy of Tamar emerged as a powerful emblem of what might be achieved when one's spirit refuses to yield to the constraints of a fallible human order. Her bold defiance, which had once threatened to upend established norms, now took on a sanctified role in the retelling of their heritage. The audacity with which she asserted her right to honor and continuity was celebrated as a catalyst for change, a reminder that the path to redemption often requires challenging the status quo and reconfiguring societal structures to align with divine intent. Her narrative, interlaced with themes of courage and transformation, resonated throughout the community, inspiring even the most downtrodden souls to believe in the possibility of personal and collective metamorphosis. Meanwhile, Judah's quiet perseverance in the wake of his earlier failures served as a counterpoint to the inevitable fallibility of man. His journey was chronicled in detailed accounts that recounted his moments of solitary prayer and reflective meditation, instances where he wrestled with the heavy burden of responsibility and the keen sting of regret. These narratives, passed down from one generation to the next, became more than mere cautionary tales. They evolved into living documents of the resilience of the human spirit. Judah's transformation was portrayed not as a fleeting change, but as a gradual, steadfast evolution that enabled him to reclaim his dignity and ultimately to restore the sanctity of his lineage. His story was interwoven with the larger tapestry of divine providence, affirming that even the deepest scars could, in time, be healed through the deliberate and measured application of faith. The community's path toward renewal was further illuminated by the constant re-examination of their sacred traditions. Debates and discussions flourished in the marketplaces, in the courtyards of homes, and during the quiet hours of the night. Each discourse was imbued with the understanding that to truly honor the divine promise, one must embrace both the light and the shadow inherent in the human condition. The ancient rituals, far from being rigid relics of a bygone era, were reinvigorated with fresh meaning and purpose. They were adapted to reflect a deeper awareness of the inevitability of error, as well as the unfathomable potential for transcendence that lay hidden within each lapse. This intellectual and spiritual renaissance was a vital component of their collective journey, a beacon that guided them steadily toward a future where every broken piece of the past was reassembled into a masterpiece of divine redemption. Thus, in the continuous cadence of life, every moment of despair was met with a resolute belief in the inevitability of restoration. The sacred texts, once recited with austere detachment, now pulsed with the vibrant energy of lived experience. They became the wellspring of a philosophy that celebrated the intricate interplay between human imperfection and the unfailing promise of divine grace. In every home, in every gathering, the retelling of the saga of Onan, Tamar, and Judah was an enduring affirmation that the divine plan was robust enough to weather the tempests of human error. It was a living testament that, though individual lives might falter, the overarching covenant was impervious, destined to flourish in spite of all obstacles. In the wake of that enduring declaration, the people, animated by a newfound sense of purpose, pressed onward with a determination that defied the weight of history. Their hearts, once heavy with the regret of missed opportunities and the sting of divine reprimand, now pulsed with the vibrant hope of renewal. Every sunrise was celebrated as a harbinger of new beginnings, every whispered prayer a pledge to continue the sacred mission passed down through generations. Across the rugged terrains and verdant valleys, the remnants of a once fractured family history began to mend as stories of redemption took root. The community, drawing strength from the ancient texts and from one another, established rituals that reinvigorated the time-worn laws and traditions. In the quiet hours of the morning, elders gathered to recount the tales of Ur's untimely fall, Onan's tragic misdeeds, and Tamar's bold reclaiming of her destiny. These recitations, though tinged with sorrow, were imbued with the resilient spirit of transformation, illustrating how the wounds of yesterday could be transmuted into the blessings of tomorrow. Within these gatherings, dialogues deepened, fostering a culture in which every individual was encouraged to reflect upon their own shortcomings, and in doing so, to seek the divine favor promised by their forefathers. Scholars and scribes labored to annotate and expand the records of these events, ensuring that the lessons learned were not lost to the passage of time. Their writings detailed the intricate interplay between divine judgment and human contrition, linking each personal failure to the overarching narrative of collective salvation. It became clear that the covenant, so seemingly jeopardized by the missteps of a few, was not an ephemeral contract, but a robust framework destined to evolve through the sacrifices and triumphs of its people. As the community's shared experiences coalesced into a formidable testament to faith, the sacred sites became hubs of spiritual and intellectual renewal. In these sanctified spaces, carvings and murals depicted the saga of the fallen and the redeemed, each stroke of the chisel and hue of the pigment signifying a chapter of pain transformed into hope. The visual legacy, as much as the written record, served to remind everyone that even the deepest fissures in the human spirit could be healed with time, repentance, and unwavering resolve. In every temple and gathering hall, the atmosphere was charged with an energy that proclaimed, no matter the transgressions of the past, the light of divine mercy shone eternally, guiding the way forward. In the midst of this transformation, personal testimonies emerged, quiet declarations of redemption that resonated powerfully within the hearts of the community. There was the story of a craftsman who, having once lost his way in the temptations of pride, found solace and purpose in dedicating his talents to the restoration of sacred relics. His hands, scarred by labor and time, became instruments of renewal as he painstakingly restored broken statues and time-worn tablets, each piece a symbolic restoration of the family's honor. Similarly, a young mother whose eyes had once been clouded by despair after bearing the burden of past generations, now nurtured her children with stories of forgiveness and hope. Through every act of kindness, every moment of sincere contrition, the living mosaic of the covenant was reassembled, each individual contribution reinforcing the inescapable truth that collective redemption was not only possible but inevitable. The philosophy that underpinned these communal efforts was simple yet profound. Human frailty was not a barrier to divine favor. It was, in truth, the very medium through which grace could be manifested. The failures of and Onan, the rebellious spirit of Tamar, and even the penitent journey of Judah were all interwoven elements of a grand design, one that demonstrated that the divine plan was not thwarted by human error, but was rather enriched by it. The recurring cycles of sin and redemption, of downfall and resurgence, were celebrated as integral chapters in the eternal saga of human existence, teaching that every moment of despair could be transmuted into a wellspring of hope. In the face of monumental challenges and insurmountable odds, the community's resolve never wavered. The hardship of the past became the impetus for forging a future where forgiveness and unity reigned supreme. The Leverett Law, once a grim reminder of failures past, was transformed into a living ritual, a covenantal promise that every lost name, every shattered bond, could be mended through sincere effort and divine compassion. Across each village and every city, the people embraced this renewed understanding, applying it not only to their personal lives, but also to the structure of their society. Their endeavors went far beyond mere reconstruction. They became beacons of inspiration for neighboring communities, radiating the timeless message that redemption was accessible to all who dared to dream of a better, more righteous future. As time marched inexorably on, the lands bore witness to a transformation that was as profound as it was gradual. The barren fields, which had once echoed with the despair of lost harvests, began to teem with the fruits of a revitalized spirit. The air, charged with the perfume of blossoming hope, carried with it the whispers of the divine promise, an assurance that the legacy of the past, no matter how scarred, could ultimately give rise to something beautiful and everlasting. With each passing season, the scars of transgression faded into vibrant symbols of resilience, testifying to the enduring power of faith and unity. In the tapestry of that renewed world, the narrative of Onan, Tamar, and Judah was etched with a clarity that inspired awe and reflection. The individual tragedies that had once seemed to herald the end of a sacred promise now shone as luminous milestones along a journey of continual rebirth. The community, having learned that the path to redemption is paved with both suffering and hope, began to share this story far and wide, ensuring that the lessons it held would resonate with every new generation. In every retelling, the timeless message emerged unmistakably, that while the human heart may falter, the covenant of divine grace remains steadfast, an ever-present force capable of turning the darkest moments into the brightest dawns. This truth, once a faint murmur amid the tribulations of loss and penance, now echoed resoundingly through the lives of the people. Their struggles and their resilience converged in a symphony of faith that redefined every fragment of their storied past. The ancient wounds were not hidden away in sorrow, but illuminated by the ceaseless light of hope and renewal. As the community embraced this understanding, each day became a canvas on which the divine plan was artfully repainted with vibrant hues of redemption. In the early morning light, when the first rays of the sun caressed the weathered stones of their ancestral dwellings, there arose a palpable sense of optimism. The lessons of Er's untimely fall, Onan's grievous defiance, and Tamar's audacious reclamation of her destiny had distilled into a universal credo, that every misstep, no matter how painful, held the potential for transformation and renewal. In the communal gatherings that followed, the elders, with voices softened by years yet imbued with wisdom, recounted the sacred history. Their words carried the cadence of long-remembered truths that had been etched into the collective consciousness by generations of trials and triumphs. They reminded the young and the old alike that the covenant, though momentarily bruised by the transgressions of the past, was as enduring as the stars in the night sky. Every recounted detail served as both a cautionary tale and an inspirational guide, a blueprint for rebuilding a legacy tarnished by error, but destined for greatness through the inexhaustible mercy of the divine. The discussions grew richer with the contributions of all, as scribes and scholars meticulously annotated the stories and expanded upon the ancient texts. They argued that the divine law was far from a rigid edict. Rather, it was a living testament to the fluidity of human nature and the infinite capacity for repentance. Thus, each recitation of the narrative, whether delivered in the soft glow of a temple or the humble murmur of a village square, became a ritual of healing, a communal act of intercession against the forces of despair. In the sculpted shadows of sacred altars and amidst the vibrant murals that adorned the walls of newly restored sanctuaries, the visual testimony of redemption blossomed. Artistic depictions of Onan, Tamar, and Judah now captured not just the stark moments of divine judgment, but also the gradual metamorphosis from sin to salvation. These images, rich in symbolism and laden with the fervor of human emotion, served as constant reminders that the divine promise was interwoven with every human endeavor. No failure was final, no lost legacy irreparable. They portrayed a continuum of struggle and triumph, a dynamic saga in which every broken fragment was destined to be reassembled into a mosaic of infinite beauty. The transformative journey continued to unfold in the everyday practices of the people. In the act of replanting barren fields, in the restoration of ancient dwellings, and in the shared moments of prayer and reflection, the community discovered that each act of renewal was an echo of divine compassion. The very land, scarred by the hardships of the past, began to flourish anew. Expanses once touched by the chill of desolation now teemed with life, a living metaphor for the promise that even the most profound losses could yield abundant hope. Every budding flower, every ray of sunlight piercing the morning fog, bore witness to the resolute power of faith that had overcome the shadow of despair. This renewed vigor was not confined to nature alone. The social fabric of the community itself was being rewoven with threads of unity and compassion. Neighbors, once estranged by the bitterness of inherited grudges, came together to share in the collective act of remembrance and reformation. Through collaborative efforts, be it in the form of rebuilding a family home or offering solace during the darkest hours, the people rekindled the sacred ties that bound them. Their actions, small yet profound, resonated with the shared understanding that redemption was not an abstract ideal, but a tangible reality born of concerted effort and heartfelt devotion. Moreover, the renewed commitment to the ancient covenant provided a new context for the interpretation of the Levirate law, a practice that had once underscored the failures of Onan, but now symbolized the enduring responsibility of kinship and duty. The law, re-examined through the lens of sincere repentance and communal solidarity, emerged as a powerful tool for reclaiming the promise of lineage. It was no longer seen as a punitive measure, but as a solemn vow to ensure continuity, not through the unblemished perfection of human effort, but through the redemptive power of collective grace. In every act carried out under this revived tradition lay the unmistakable imprint of divine favor, a promise that life, no matter how marred by past transgressions, was constantly being rewritten in the language of mercy. Through this ongoing revival, each individual story contributed to a larger, more intricate tapestry of faith. Judah's own journey, from one of pride and isolation to that of introspection and sincere contrition, became emblematic of the transformative power of divine wisdom. His evolution was chronicled in the hearts of those who witnessed his struggle, serving as a timeless reminder that humility and perseverance could restore even the most tarnished legacies. Judah's gradual metamorphosis acted as a catalyst that propelled the entire community forward, reinforcing the belief that every soul, regardless of its past missteps, possessed the innate strength to rise again. Within this vast, interlaced narrative, the personal and the communal merged seamlessly. Each individual moment of internal reckoning, each act of compassion extended towards a fellow believer, enriched the overarching story of redemption. The people began to perceive themselves not as isolated fragments of a broken past, but as integral parts of an eternal continuum, a tapestry where every thread, no matter how fragile, contributed indispensably to the resplendent whole. The vision that had once seemed distant and abstract was now living, breathing in the collective hearts and daily actions of the community. The divine promise, woven through every facet of their existence, echoed in every whispered prayer, every shared smile, and every act of courageous defiance against despair. It was a promise that transcended the boundaries of time and space, a promise that the sacrifices of the past were the very soil in which the future's hope would take root. Thus, in the steady, unwavering march of days, the people continued to build upon the legacy of their forefathers. They cultivated not only the fields and the temples, but also the spirit of resilience and hope, ensuring that the covenant of divine grace would endure in the heart of every generation. In the midst of this ongoing renewal, the community found itself immersed in a profound transformation. The scars of the past, etched deep by the tragedies of Ur's fall and Onan's rebellion, gradually softened into lessons of humility and perseverance. The once somber echoes of divine judgment gave way to a vibrant chorus of reconciliation, where the pain of loss melded seamlessly with the promise of a reimagined future. Families, now united in the pursuit of rebuilding both their heritage and their spirits, began to honor the sacred narratives by passing down oral traditions and written records. In the flickering light of evening gatherings, elders would recite the events as if unspooling a divine tapestry, a story that intertwined the tragic missteps of human frailty with the liberating power of redemption. Each recitation was an act of reaffirmation, a reminder that every failure, when met with contrition and the will to repair, could catalyze an even deeper communion with the divine. The remembered names of Onan, Tamar, and Judah served not as markers of disgrace, but as enduring symbols of the transformative journey that every soul could undertake. The daily rhythms of life became suffused with rituals that encapsulated this renewed vision of legacy. In the sprawling courtyards of ancient homes and the hallowed halls of communal worship, the renewing flame of hope burned brightly. Farmers tilled the earth with a fervor that rivaled their sorrow, knowing that each seed planted was a metaphor for regeneration. Artisans and craftsmen labored diligently to restore the faded murals and time-worn inscriptions that chronicled their storied past, every stroke of their tools an homage to the sacred covenant, and an affirmation of the unyielding hope that had been rekindled in their hearts. Even the structure of communal law and custom experienced a renaissance. The Levirate law, once a stark reminder of broken oaths and missed responsibilities, was now interpreted through the lens of restorative justice. Its observance was transformed into a sacred duty to secure continuity, a solemn promise that each act of redemption, each reclaimed opportunity to forge a legacy, was both a personal and communal victory. Leaders and scholars convened in spirited assemblies to debate the true essence of the ancient statutes, refining them to reflect not only an unyielding adherence to tradition, but also the compassionate realities of mortal imperfection. As debates unfolded in sunlit squares and within shadowed temple corridors, the community reached a consensus that forgiveness and the willingness to amend one's ways were the cornerstones of a legacy that could transcend even the most grievous errors. This new ethos of healing and accountability permeated every aspect of life. In bustling marketplaces, where the sense of fresh bread and ripening fruit mingled with the murmurs of commerce, conversations often turned to the significance of personal and collective transformation. Neighbors exchanged stories of their own tribulations and triumphs, each narrative echoing the timeless lesson that redemption is always within reach. Even the youngest members of the community, wide-eyed with innocent wonder, absorbed these lessons through playful recitations and simple acts of kindness, learning that every misfortune had the potential to birth hope when met with determination and love. Amid this cultural and spiritual revival, individual testimonies emerged as luminous beacons of change. There was the story of a once disillusioned young man who had wandered far from the path of righteousness, only to return with a heart humbled by his own errors, vowing to honor the divine promise with every step he took. His journey, marked by days of solitary reflection under starlit skies and nights of fervent supplication, became an inspiration that echoed through the community. Likewise, a resilient widow, mirroring the courage of Tamar, found in her quiet defiance the strength to reconstruct not only her own future, but also that of her lineage, ensuring that her voice was forever interwoven with the sacred narrative of revival. These personal victories were celebrated in festivals that blended solemn remembrance with exuberant joy. In these communal celebrations, ancient hymns were sung with renewed passion, each note a tribute to the divine mercy that transformed sorrow into jubilation. The rhythms of traditional dances, passed down through countless generations, took on a new significance, symbolizing the eternal cycle of descent and ascension that defined the human experience. Lanterns were lit at dusk, their gentle glow mirroring the soft light of hope that had replaced the harsh shadows of bygone misfortunes. As the seasons turned, nature itself bore testimony to this sweeping transformation. The barren fields, once emblematic of desolation and loss, gradually yielded to a burst of verdant life, golden wheat swaying in the gentle breeze, orchards blossoming under the tender care of diligent hands, and meadows resplendent with wildflowers that seemed to sing of rebirth. Each natural renewal served as a powerful allegory for the community's own journey, a silent, enduring promise that life, no matter how battered, possesses the innate ability to recover, to flourish anew. The very earth, cradled by the hands of time, appeared to whisper secrets of resilience to all who would listen, promising that even the deepest wounds could heal under the nourishing rays of divine favor. In the sanctuaries, where the faithful gathered for rites both ancient and evolved, prayer became a communal bridge linking the present to the eternal. The sacred texts, once recited in tones of somber admonition, now resonated with the uplifting cadences of revival. Each verse was imbued with the dual power of warning and hope, urging the listeners to confront their transgressions while assuring them of the ceaseless possibility of forgiveness. The quiet hum of collective prayer, interspersed with bursts of heartfelt song, underscored a universal truth: that every moment of human frailty was but a stepping stone on the path to a divine destiny that never truly faltered. Within this spiritual milieu, the stories of Onan, Tamar, and Judah were continuously reinterpreted, each generation adding its own layers of insight and nuance. The narrative was no longer a static recounting of past calamities. It evolved dynamically, reflecting the lived experiences and emerging wisdom of its people. The characters of old, whose actions once seemed to evoke only divine wrath, came to be understood in a more compassionate light, as flawed individuals whose journeys of failure and redemption mirrored the eternal human struggle. Their tales, once fixed in the cold, unyielding ink of history, were now transformed into living legends that offered solace, instruction, and inspiration. This transformative process was not without its challenges, as the community strove to reconcile the harsh judgments of the past with the tender promises of renewal. Debates and dissent often erupted. Some clung rigidly to the exacting traditions of old, fearing that the softened interpretations might dilute the stern lessons of divine justice. Others, emboldened by the tangible evidence of personal transformation and communal revival, championed a more nuanced approach that embraced both the inevitability of human error and the transcendent possibility of reparation. These dialogues, though sometimes fraught with tension, ultimately enriched the collective understanding of what it meant to be part of a covenant that was as much about learning from mistakes as it was about upholding unyielding standards. In this crucible of divergent voices and sincere aspirations, a new synthesis emerged, a harmonious balance that honored the sacredness of the ancient law while celebrating the profound generosity of divine grace. Time, as the community's shared vision solidified into a palpable reality, the boundaries between past and present blurred. The once stark dichotomies of judgment and mercy, failure and triumph, were resolved in a living tapestry of experiences that continuously affirmed the essence of the divine covenant. Every heart, having traversed its own tumultuous journey, found solace in the realization that the path to redemption was not paved solely by perfection, but by the courage to rise after each fall. The legacy of the forefathers, with all its imperfections and its grandeur, was no longer a distant relic but an ever-present beacon, guiding each individual toward a future defined not by the mistakes of yesterday, but by the transformative power of hope and the enduring embrace of divine love. In that spirit, the community marched forward, buoyed by the renewed conviction that every heart carried within it the capacity for reawakening, and every soul harbored the potential for sublime restoration. The days passed in a seamless continuum of learning and rebuilding, where each sunrise brought with it the promise of fresh beginnings, and every dusk cloaked the land with gentle reminders of past lessons, urging its people to look forward with unwavering trust in the divine plan. The sacred sites, long neglected by the passage of time and the indifference of decay, were gradually restored to their former glory. Stone by stone, the crumbling altars and faded inscriptions were lovingly tended to by devout hands. These acts of restoration were more than mere repairs. They were symbolic gestures that declared, "The divine covenant endures despite the ravages of human error and time itself." In the quiet of early morning, as the first beams of light illuminated the intricate carvings and storied remnants of a once glorious past, the people gathered. They knelt in reverent silence before these relics of heritage, each individual prayer a stitch in the great fabric of collective redemption. Among them, the voices of the elders soared with poignant recollections of the history that had brought them to this crossroads. They spoke of whose untimely departure had cast a long, sorrowful shadow over the lineage, of Onan, whose selfish defiance had deepened the wounds of the community, and of Tamar, whose courageous defiance had not only challenged a corrupt tradition, but had also sparked a transformation that would herald the promise of life renewed. Their narratives, passed orally from one generation to the next, were enriched with the wisdom of ages and tempered by the bittersweet acknowledgement of human imperfection. These stories no longer served solely as admonitions against straying from the righteous path. They had evolved into dynamic blueprints for renewal, offering guidance on how to transform even the most painful chapters into testimonies of redemption. In the course of this collective journey, the very framework of social and religious life underwent profound modification. Rituals that once communicated rigid expectation now vibrated with the joyful prospect of second chances. Communal feasts were organized not just as celebrations of abundance, but as symbolic banquets of forgiveness, where even those who had once been ostracized were welcomed back into the fellowship. In these gatherings, every shared morsel and every spoken word of solace reinforced the notion that redemption was a living, breathing process, a process that required the heartfelt participation of every member of the community. As the reformed practices took root, the reinterpretation of the ancient Levirate law emerged as a central pillar in the reconstitution of their heritage. It was no longer viewed solely as an archaic imposition to guarantee progeny, but rather as a profound commitment to the continuity of life and legacy. The law, re-examined in the light of current experience, reminded the people that preserving a sacred covenant demanded not just adherence to ritual, but a deep internalization of responsibility and love. This renewed understanding transformed how communities approached familial bonds, urging them to reconcile and restore relationships that had been fractured by past misdeeds. In this way, the legal and moral frameworks intermingled, each reinforcing the other in the perpetual effort to maintain a living, vibrant covenant with the divine. Amid these systemic and communal reforms, individual transformation continued to be celebrated in no less dramatic a fashion. Personal testimonies became powerful agents of change in the public sphere. A young man, once overwhelmed by the burden of his own transgressions, emerged from a period of exile and despair to take up the mantle of leadership in his village. His journey from isolation to reintegration, marked by long hours of solitary repentance, rigorous self-discipline, and ultimately, communal acceptance, epitomized the very essence of the redemptive process. His every step was a visible affirmation that no matter how far one might stray from the light, the possibility of return was inscribed in the divine will. Likewise, a widowed mother, echoing the strength of Tamar, navigated the precarious terrain of social stigma to reclaim her rightful place within the familial tapestry. Her resilience, born out of the hardships of loss and the sting of societal rejection, became a rallying point for others who had suffered in silence. In her steadfast determination to secure a future for her children and honor the lineage to which she belonged, she demonstrated that courage, when aligned with divine purpose, could overturn even the most entrenched patterns of exclusion and despair. Her story, tenderly recounted by neighbors and later chronicled in communal annals, served as a beacon of hope for all those who believed that the divine promise was alive and attainable. Meanwhile, the transformation of Judah himself, long before the community had come to revere his journey, provided an enduring model of personal evolution. Once a man driven by pride and the reckless weight of unmet expectations, Judah's gradual descent into humility and self-examination became a lived parable for his people. His internal odyssey was marked by moments of deep sorrow, followed by the uplifting realization that the divine could forgive as much as it demanded accountability. Through his reflective solitude, punctuated by heartfelt supplications and earnest acts of restitution, Judah found his way back to the core of the sacred covenant. His transformation was not heralded by grand proclamations or ostentatious gestures. Rather, it unfolded slowly, each measured step a testament to the quiet power of contrition and the redemptive promise that the divine plan never truly abandons even the most wayward souls. As these individual and communal metamorphoses converged, the landscape of their shared world began to mirror the inner workings of their spiritual renaissance. Once barren fields were transformed into fertile expanses, lush orchards replaced the desolation of the past, and the once crumbling sanctuaries now resounded with the melodies of renewed worship. The natural world itself was recast as both participant and witness in this grand narrative, its cycles of seasonal change and renewal mirroring the perpetual promise of resurrection and reform. Every gust of wind, every burst of radiant sunlight was read as a divine signal, a soft, persistent assurance that life, in all its multifaceted glory, was ordained to flourish despite, and often because of, the missteps of human endeavor. In the midst of this renewed vibrancy, creative expression flourished as both art and testimony. Muralists, poets, and musicians found in the ancient stories a fertile ground for exploring themes of despair turned to triumph. Their works did not merely capture the stark lessons of the past, they magnified them with the brilliant colors of hope, weaving a tapestry of imagery that celebrated both the fragility and the resilience of the human spirit. In the vibrant strokes of a mural depicting Judah's journey from arrogance to humility, or in the haunting cadence of a ballad recounting Tamar's fierce determination, the divine narrative was continually reinterpreted, ensuring that each new generation could find a personal echo of its eternal promise. The philosophical debates that rippled through the community grew ever more sophisticated as scholars and theologians, inspired by the visible changes around them, sought to reconcile the ancient texts with contemporary realities. In their discussions, they argued that the divine law was not immutable in its call for righteousness, but was, instead, a living document, one that absorbed the lessons of each era and evolved accordingly. These debates, far from fracturing the unity of the community, enriched its understanding of faith as a dynamic interplay between tradition and innovation. The very act of reinterpreting sacred mandates became, in itself, an act of devotion, a reaffirmation that the divine promise, though etched in immutable truths, was always accessible to those who approached it with an open heart. Under the unyielding sky, where the firmament bore witness to each prayer and every outstretched hand, the community's journey toward redemption reached a crescendo of collective understanding and hope. In the gentle embrace of twilight, as the colors of the day surrendered to the soft blues and purples of dusk, every living soul seemed to radiate the light of divine affection. The long shadows cast by the relics of a troubled past were gradually replaced by the luminous silhouettes of a people united by an unbreakable bond, a bond forged in the crucible of suffering, yet tempered by the infinite capacity for renewal. Thus, as the community continued to move forward, each day imbued with the silent strength of timeless truths and the palpable warmth of shared aspirations, it became clear that the story of Onan, Tamar, and Judah was not simply an ancient narrative confined to dusty scrolls. It was a living testament, a perennial reminder that every human misstep, when met with sincere repentance and communal support, could be transformed into a stepping stone toward an ever brighter future. In every whispered prayer, every act of rebuilding, every song of hope sung beneath the starlit heavens, the promise of redemption was reaffirmed. That divine love, ever boundless and inexhaustible, would forever illuminate the path of those who dared to rise, time and time again, from the ashes of their own frailty. With such luminous assurance echoing in every heart, the community pressed on into its destined future, a future where every scar, every sorrow born from ancient transgressions, was reinterpreted as a vital strand in the grand tapestry of renewal. In the soft glow of twilight that mingled with the first blush of dawn, each moment carried the residue of lessons learned and the quiet confidence that no fall was absolute, no darkness permanent. In homes, marketplaces, and sacred halls, the retelling of the storied past became a living ritual, a collective act of remembrance interwoven with prayers for deliverance and pledges to nurture the covenant anew. Elders recited the epic account of erasure, Onan's defiance, and Tamar's resolute reclamation with voices that trembled not only with sorrow, but also with the fierce joy of salvation regained. Their words, imbued with the weight of ancestral wisdom, stirred the souls of all who listened, weaving a connection between the ancient promise and the vibrant possibilities of the present. Every syllable delivered and every tear silently shed affirmed that the divine law, though exacting in its judgment, was ultimately a reservoir of grace and infinite mercy. Day by day, the community's transformation became evident in the regeneration of its physical and spiritual landscape. Crumbling altars and dilapidated sanctuaries were tenderly restored, each stone and inscription symbolizing a renewed commitment to honor the covenant. The barren fields, once echoing the desolation of unmet legacy, blossomed under the care of determined hands, their golden grains a living metaphor for hope reaped from the soil of perseverance. In every corner of their shared world, nature itself testified to the cyclical power of rebirth, a continual reminder that life, regardless of its past wounds, could transform into something extraordinarily beautiful when nurtured with love and steadfast faith. As the community's collective vision deepened, individuals found within themselves a renewed strength to overcome their personal tribulations. A young man, marred by the weight of his own missteps, emerged from a long season of exile to become a beacon of leadership. His journey marked by solitary hours of reflection and triumphant moments of reintegration. His struggle and eventual resurgence were celebrated not only as a personal victory, but as emblematic of the eternal truth that every soul has the capacity to mend, to rise, and to contribute to the sacred mosaic of redemption. Similarly, a widowed mother, reminiscent of Tamar's unwavering resolve, stood as a living testament to the redemptive power of courage amid societal scorn. Her determination to secure a better future for her children, to reclaim the dignity that had once been marred by loss, resonated deeply throughout the community, inspiring others to challenge the constraints of tradition and to embrace a more compassionate, inclusive vision of kinship. In the interstices of everyday life, the ancient laws and rituals, particularly the Levirate tradition, were imbued with new meaning. No longer viewed solely as compulsions born out of necessity, these practices were celebrated as solemn affirmations of communal solidarity and the enduring duty to preserve the sacred lineage. Debates and discussions on these topics, once a source of division and despair, became vibrant forums of intellectual and spiritual growth. Scholars, elders, and even the youth engaged passionately, re-examining the old statutes through the lens of contemporary experience. They argued that the true essence of the divine mandate lay not in strict legalism, but in the transformative power of forgiveness, responsibility, and love. In this renewed understanding, every failure was recast as an invitation to rebuild, every lapse as a prelude to a grander act of reparation. Thus, the very fabric of society was rewoven with threads of empathy and unity, bridging the chasms created by past misdeeds and reassembling them into a harmonious whole. The visual arts flourished in this era of regeneration, serving as both homage and catalyst to the profound changes unfolding in the community. Murals, sculptures, and intricate carvings depicted the storied journey of Onan, Tamar, and Judah, not as mere cautionary tales of divine wrath, but as complex living narratives of human vulnerability intertwined with celestial compassion. These works, created by artists driven by both personal experience and collective aspiration, resonated with powerful imagery. Broken chains mended by gentle hands, shrouded faces lifted toward shafts of golden light, and turbulent waters calmed by the steady rhythm of prayer. Through these vibrant expressions, the timeless message of hope was continually renewed, offering every individual a chance to see their own struggles reflected in the epic saga and to find solace in the promise of eventual deliverance. As seasons changed and years passed, the community's commitment to this sacred path culminated in a palpable atmosphere of rejoicing and introspection. Festivities that once celebrated mundane harvests and local lore evolved into grand, heartfelt celebrations of resilience and faith. Festivals of light and renewal, marked by music, dance, and communal feasting, became annual affirmations of their shared destiny, a destiny forged in the crucible of tribulation and tempered by the inexorable flow of divine love. In these moments of collective jubilation, the scars of the past were not forgotten, but honored as integral notes in the symphony of existence, a reminder that the journey toward redemption is as much about acknowledging suffering as it is about celebrating recovery. Under the vast, unyielding sky, where the eternal expanse of stars bore silent witness to every whispered prayer, the community's renewed hope stood as a bulwark against the relentless march of time. Each day, as the sun rose to cast its resplendent light on dew-kissed fields, and each night, as the moon ascended amid a chorus of celestial sounds, the people renewed their pact with the divine. This pact was not a contract of perfection, but a living promise that every human endeavor, despite its inherent frailties, could be lifted toward the light by the inexhaustible mercy of God. The cadence of daily life, simple, enduring, and ceaselessly hopeful, became a testament to a truth that transcended mortal existence, that every end harbors within its quiet depths the seed of a new beginning. In this final, luminous chapter of their collective journey, the legacy of the forefathers was reimagined as a dynamic force propelling the community toward an ever brighter horizon. The once shattered remnants of a sacred covenant were not consigned to the annals of regret, but were reassembled with newfound reverence and robust determination. Each gesture of kindness, every act of honest labor, every measured step taken in humility contributed to a grand narrative of redemption, a narrative that assured all who heard it that while the past may leave its indelible marks, it would never dictate the future. The divine plan, intricate and ever-evolving, continued to guide them with gentle persistence, like a beacon in the twilight, promising that the cycle of fall and rise was eternal, and that true grace was found in the courage to begin anew. As the final vestiges of the day melted into the embrace of night, and the world was bathed in the quiet glow of hope fulfilled, each soul carried forward the timeless lesson that redemption is not an endpoint but a perpetual journey. It is a journey measured not only by our triumphs, but by the grace with which we rise after every fall, a journey that is as boundless as the divine love that sustains us. Thus, in that serene and enduring certainty, the community's saga reached its resplendent conclusion, a conclusion that was, in truth, but another stepping stone toward a future radiant with promise and illuminated by the eternal light of divine mercy. That promise resonated in every heart, serving as a continual reminder that the path of redemption is unceasing, woven into the very fabric of life, and carried forward by each act of humility and resolve. As the final chapter of this retelling unfolds, the echoes of the past merge with the gentle cadence of hope, unifying the lessons of ancient transgressions with the triumphant spirit of new beginnings. In the quiet hours when the world seemed suspended between the fading embers of dusk and the dawning light of renewal, individuals from all walks of life gathered in solemn reflection, their minds and hearts focused on the legacy handed down through generations. They recalled the sorrowful fates of and Onan, symbols of the peril of deviation from righteousness, while also celebrating Tamar's unwavering determination to reclaim her voice and destiny. Judah's own journey, marked by penance, introspection, and eventual triumph, emerged not only as a personal odyssey, but as an enduring parable that would guide the community through the vicissitudes of human frailty. In these moments of reflection, the sacred texts took on a new dimension. No longer were they static records of divine judgment. They became living documents, imbued with the collective wisdom and resilient spirit of the people. Through careful study and heartfelt discussion, Scholars, elders, and youth alike discovered that every verse and every ancient inscription spoke of a duality, a contrast between the weight of human imperfection and the immeasurable depth of divine compassion. They learned to see that while the failures of the past could not be undone, their consequences provided fertile ground for a renewed commitment to the divine covenant. Every retelling in the community was a ritual of healing. At dawn and dusk, in the glow of temple fires and the simplicity of home gatherings, the narrative was recited with reverence. The mournful notes of loss were interlaced with vibrant declarations of hope, creating a tapestry that honored both the pain of bygone missteps and the exuberance of rebirth. In this seamless flow of remembrance, the community was united by a shared understanding that the cycle of fall and resurgence was as natural as the changing seasons, and that within every ending lay the blueprint for a new beginning. The physical landscape, too, became an eloquent testament to this eternal cycle. Cracked and weathered walls of ancient sanctuaries were meticulously restored, each repaired stone a symbol of the community's determination to reclaim its heritage. The once barren fields, which had borne the scars of neglect, now burst forth with life, golden crops swaying in the breeze, their abundance a visible proof that perseverance, nurtured by faith, could overcome even the harshest of circumstances. Nature itself, in its silent symphony, echoed the community's journey. Streams that cut through parched earth, gradually softening the barren terrain, and trees that, despite enduring storms, grew tall and resilient, their branches reaching upward as if in supplication. In the art and creativity that flourished during this Renaissance, every brushstroke and every sculpted form was a prayer rendered visible. Muralists portrayed scenes of redemption with meticulous care, the sorrow of a fallen hero softened by the gleam of forgiveness in his eyes, the defiant determination of a woman who reclaimed her destiny radiating in every vibrant color. Musicians composed ballads that transcended the mere recounting of history. Their melodies carried the bittersweet interplay of lament and celebration, inviting listeners to lose themselves in the profound beauty of a narrative that was both ancient and ever-new. Literature, too, found its voice in this age of renewal. Poets and scribes filled scrolls with verses that intertwined the sorrow of past transgressions with the jubilant promise of transformation, their words a fusion of regret and gratitude that resonated across time. The dialogues within the community evolved into dynamic forums for intellectual and spiritual growth. In bustling courtyards and quiet corners of local sanctuaries, debates flowed as freely as the wind, centering on the timeless questions of accountability, forgiveness, and the evolving nature of divine law. These discussions were marked by a genuine respect for tradition, coupled with an ardent desire to reinterpret the sacred statutes in a manner that embraced the complexities of modern life. The ancient Levirate law, once a source of somber admonition for failed obligations, was revisited with fresh eyes, as a covenant that underscored the responsibility to protect and nurture the family, both in literal and spiritual terms. Through this reflective process, the community not only reaffirmed its commitment to age-old customs, but also forged innovative paths that allowed those customs to breathe new life into every interaction and every relationship. Personal testimonials continued to play a vital role in shaping this expansive retelling. The journey of a reformed youth who once wandered in the shadows of his own misdeeds became a beacon for many, his narrative a powerful affirmation that redemption is attained not by denying one's past, but by confronting it with courage and humility. His transformation, marked by solitude and struggle, eventually blossomed into a public tale of resilience that inspired others to seek their own paths back to the light. Equally, the story of a woman who, despite the stigma of loss and isolation, carved out a future for her children echoed with the strength of Tamar's legacy, a testament to the indomitable spirit that refuses to be confined by the limitations of human judgment. These individual journeys, meticulously interwoven into the collective memory of the tribe, underscored the profound truth that every life, regardless of its imperfections, has the potential to contribute to the sacred mosaic of redemption. In the final analysis, the community's odyssey is a timeless portrait of humanity's relentless pursuit of grace amid the inevitable reality of error. The legacy of Onan, Tamar, and Judah, once marked by stark moments of divine retribution, now shimmers with the luminous promise of rebirth. Through the interplay of personal contrition, communal support, and an unwavering belief in the enduring mercy of God, every fracture in the past was transformed into a foundation for a brighter, more compassionate future. The covenant, though tested by the frailties of human endeavor, remained an indomitable force, a beacon guiding each soul through the perennial cycles of loss and renewal. As night slowly gave way to the gentle blush of a new dawn, the hearts of the people beat in quiet unison, each pulse affirming that their collective journey was far from over. Their eyes, raised to the infinite tapestry of the sky, shimmered with silent promises, a vow to honor every lesson learned, to build upon the ruins of yesterday, and to step boldly into a future illuminated by divine grace. The retelling of this ancient narrative, now enriched with layers of suffering and triumph, stands as a living testament to the enduring truth that redemption is an ever-unfolding journey, one that is as boundless and transformative as the love that guides it. And so, with spirits alight with the fire of perpetual hope, the community embraced the timeless adage that every end is but a prelude to a new beginning. Their saga, etched into the scrolls of time and carried forth in every whispered prayer, becomes a timeless symphony, a melody of sorrow transmuted into joy, of despair molded into resilience, and of darkness yielding to the everlasting light of divine compassion. In that eternal interplay of fate and fortitude, every life finds its place in the grand, inexorable design of redemption, an unending cycle that continues to inspire and uplift generation after generation.